Party people, Tony Rowe here. Man, Alexei Shirov, so hot right now. uh, he just came off the FIDE Grand Swiss, okay, that big tournament that recently just concluded. And I think he went +3 and he beat like, three 2600s or whatever, just complete slouches. And then he drew also MVL, Perugia, Yu Yang Yi, and some other notable name. Like he just was on like literal fire. And then I saw this game from the European Team Championships that was played maybe 2 days ago. I wanted to get it out yesterday. I couldn't. That is just spectacular. Like he's just a freaking genius. He's a literal wizard. All right, so let's look at this game real quick. So it's a Ruy Lopez, and one of the things I love about Shirov is like, he's got like this attacking style like all these Latvians do. But also another thing about all these Latvians like Tal, Shabalov, Shirov, of course, is like they play just the most classical openings, and they do their research and they put all their pieces on good centralized squares, and then they just find ways to bust up your friggin' king. So this is a standard Chigorin style Ruy Lopez. Okay. There are other options, of course, like, the Berlin, super popular, knight f6 and then knight e4. Even here, knight e4 is possible, the open Sicilian. But the Chigorin is like sort of like the chess opening in a way, like this classical Ruy Lopez. White goes c3, d4. Not d4 right away because bishop g4 can be annoying, so white goes h3 first. And then black plays sort of the first somewhat rare move of the game, rook e8. And this is like just a slightly less common way to reach the Zaitsev. More normal to reach the Zaitsev would be bishop b7, then d4, rook e8. But rook e8's fine. I don't know if there's anything significantly different about it if you just play bishop b7 the next move. But so yeah, we get d4, bishop b7, and then this cheeky sort of repetition here, attacking f7, rook f8, and then because h6 is a useful move in these structures anyway, whoops. White usually just goes back, and then black goes rook e8. And there have been hundreds of games drawn this way, unfortunately. But yeah, that nowadays is a trick just to gain one more move towards getting to the 40-move time control usually. By the way, shout out to this Shirov mullet in this picture, killing it. Okay, and then Shirov goes and plays kind of a rare move here. He goes a3. And more normal, like historically, would be something like knight b to d2, really focusing more around the fact that like black's plan is in the Zaitsev is like you put all your pieces on the most active squares, like bishop b7, rook e8, and then you go like bishop f8, kind of all ganging up on e4, and if white pushes d5, then you play like knight a5 and c6. You hit the bishop, then you play c6, you start busting up this center. A4, picking away at the queen side, h6. Just useful move in general, but of course, like all these knight g5 or bishop f7 tricks no longer work. Bishop c2, really kind of in preparation for e takes d4, white, and knight a5, white just starts with by getting the bishop to safety out of knight a5, protecting e4, and then e takes d, c takes d4, knight b4, bishop b1, and then c5, which is like positionally very committal. You wouldn't play this move unless like knight d7 was really good, and you have chances to go f5 later because it really locks this bishop in, gives white extra central space, but because like CD, knight d4, d5, e5, knight e4 probably is a line or something. And because black is kind of threatening to get in d5 at some point himself, like white is kind of compelled to do this. And then knight d7, rook a3, getting ready for some kind of a swing. And then either c4 or f5. It's like this is one of the most aggressive, crazy variations of the Ruy Lopez. But yeah, Shirov goes with this quiet a3 move instead of going knight b to d2, a4, bishop c2. And it's kind of a subtle move. Like, of course, now any knight a5 and white can just tuck back on with bishop a2 and keep the bishop on this this diagonal, looking at the d5 square and this weak f7 pawn. But also now if white decides to tuck this bishop back with bishop c2, ed, cd, knight b4 is no longer possible. So there's no more of like this main line stuff where black goes here and then gets knight b4 and then c5, because you don't lose a tempo with the bishop anymore. Knight b4 is impossible. So it's kind of like this little tiny move. And even after bishop a2, which is like the next h6, again, very useful sort of Zaitsev style move. And then now after bishop a2, white even maybe has ideas of going like b4, a4, or just b4 to gain more space on the queen side. It doesn't happen in the game, but it is a possible theme down the road. Again, thematic Zaitsev style stuff with bishop f8. And Shirov probably did some research on this game because a3 is actually Stockfish's first choice. And I think it's just kind of like theoretically in a way sort of challenging. I mean, not super, super dangerous, but like, for instance, now like d5 I think is just kind of good. Like a lot of Ruy Lopez positions you can kind of compare to King's Indian style positions in a way because of this like e4 d5 structure versus this c7 to e5 chain, especially with white going c4 next move. And some parts of black's strategy like don't really mesh all that well. First of all, white just has a little bit more space for now anyway. But like, you know, this bishop not super well placed on b7 once the pawn hits d5. In a way, this rook, again, I think, in a way, like would rather be on f8, for instance. Just because once the e file closes, it's not super useful, and if black wants to get an f5, it's hard. So, but in general, black sort of, because of that, gives up on f5, like the knight's in the way, the rook's on e8. He has to start chipping away with c6 instead. But I don't know, like in this position specifically, yeah, you kind of reach this structure here. So black goes c6, white goes c4, black goes c6, and after knight c3, bc, dc, bishop c6, bishop c4. You get this kind of structure where it looks like almost like a weird Sicilian, like e5 Sicilian in a way. Similar structure to like a Sveshnikov or a Kalashnikov or something, but like, I don't know, this seems kind of fishy to me for black. Not that he's like much worse, but maybe slightly worse. I mean, the bishop on c6 is sort of oddly placed. Again, like this backward pawn on d6, this weak square on d5, this weak pawn on a5. Like, I feel like white's play is relatively easy. Something like, you know, b4, queen b3, tickling, or even just bishop e3, very natural developing move, good. Knight h2 to g4, starting to use this knight, which is hard to zero in on this d5 square. Diagonal 2 moves away is like, it takes 4 moves for a knight to get here, and sometimes it's very hard to do that. But knight h2, knight g4, you can trade off here, or you can go back to e3 and hop in here. So that's another typical strategy in this structure. Note that h6 prevents bishop g5, which would be very annoying here. Yeah, so I think white's like a little better already, but it's interesting. Like Erdos goes wrong pretty much immediately here and goes with queen c7, which again is like sort of a natural move. You're kind of x-raying this loose bishop here, and you're waiting a second maybe to see where you want to put this knight on c6. But there's sort of you're guarding f7. Like there's a lot that this move has going for it. I mean, maybe you're kind of threatening like a positional threat of going bishop e4, hitting here, and you know, even if white goes bishop f7, at least you traded the e pawn off for your f pawn. You can get these guys rolling. But Shirov finds like a really great move to start with, like that immediately exploits queen c7 in like this really subtle way. So if you have a second, take a second, see if you can find the move. Okay, that move is knight to h4. Now that the queen takes like an x-ray eye off of the h4 square, so like before knight h4 probably would be met by knight e4, hitting the knight on h4. Now that the knight is no longer in danger on the h4 square, it's free to hop into f5, which is super dangerous for black. And indeed, Erdos tried bishop d7 here, hitting the bishop and also protecting f5. But again, this runs into like the most Alexei Shirov move of all time. So if you can pause your video again, see if you can find this move. Okay, so this move is knight d5, hanging the bishop. And it sort of is forced to take the bishop. I mean, knight d5, bishop d5, or knight d5, queen d5, hitting the rook and hitting f7. That's probably better. Knight d5, queen d5 seems pretty fatal. And something like queen d8, bishop e3 looks pretty bad as well. When again, like this looks pretty nasty to deal with, and also like knight d5, queen d5, same threat. There are, as usual, my full annotations and more variations in the study that I'll link to in the description down there. Yeah, so after knight d5, Erdos goes for it. Knight takes f6 is the point, and then queen h5, bringing one more piece into the attack, threatening very significantly. The idea is actually really simple. I mean, it's basically bishop h6 and rook e3 to g3 with mate coming very quickly. So Erdos actually finds like a really good defensive resource here, in my opinion. He plays f5. And, well, the first point is like the variation in the game. After bishop takes h6, bishop takes h6, queen takes h6, Erdos has f4, which not only shuts down rook e3, but also shuts down the destination square, and kind of leaves white with just these two attacking pieces sort of stranded over on the king side with no one else to come help. And yeah, I mean, with queen e6 or rook e6 coming, it looks kind of scary. There is a better move after f5. Not that easy to see, though. One problem, I think, the other genius thing about f5 is that if e takes f5, there's bishop to e7, hitting this knight and stopping f6, for instance. When it's actually kind of hard to see the way forward. If you have to retreat the knight, that's kind of a non-starter. But yeah, there's a pretty spectacular move here in knight g6. When fg6, queen g6, queen h8, queen h6, king g8, rook e3, threatening rook g3 with mate, bishop h4, and then this very subtle move, rook f3, excuse me, just looking to get the f-pawn involved with f6, when either f7 or queen g7 are pretty big threats. And again, it's very hard to defend as black because, like, now your bishop is actually, your queen is kind of tied to the defense of this bishop, which makes it hard to play like a retreating move that might be required with like queen f7 because you're hanging this piece back. There's one more pretty variation. I feel like I just have to show off all these sweet variations because there's all this like weird stuff I found when analyzing this game. I don't know how much Shirov saw. I would love to see if there was like a post-game, like a post-mortem of this game or something, or hear Shirov's thoughts on it in like a lecture or something, but I don't think that exists right now. Maybe I missed it. Another natural move here instead of f5 would be king h7, just protecting the pawn. And there's a problem with this move in that it relinquishes a small amount of control over the f7 square, and white can use pretty much all of the rest of his pieces to try and deflect the queen away from the f7 square. And there's this little subtlety that, okay, so I'll just show you the move. b3, so sick. And then queen takes b3, bishop takes h6. Beautiful. Like, unbelievable. And then bishop h6, rook e to b1. This rook is guarding, so obviously like a move like queen a4, queen f7 actually is just made after queen f7, king h8, knight g6 made. So black has to stay guarding f7, which means he has to stay on this diagonal. Rook e to b1, so queen a2 isn't possible. And after queen c4, rook b4, now we're covering all of these. queen e6, only move. But now when you play queen e6, the bishop doesn't cover that square. So, so knight f5 wins, picking this thing up, or forcing this, which would be very sad. Okay, so queen h5. So let's just review the sequence. Queen c7, knight h4, bishop d7, knight d5, double exclam, my annotation. Knight f6, gf, queen h5, f5, bishop h6, bishop h6, queen h6, f4. Woo! And I think this is like the only serious Shirov error of the game. He goes knight f5, which allows black to... But I kind of get why he does. Because if he sort of doesn't force the pawn to come onto this square, I'm guessing he was like a little bit worried about other pieces joining the defense. At least now he has this threat of f6, which is pretty significant, and sort of forces f6 from black. So like while Shirov's still kind of only attacking with a queen in this f5 pawn, you know, these pieces haven't even entered the game yet, and this piece is kind of offside, at least for a second. So he's still got a little steam left in the tank here. And white's not worse. It's about equal here, in my opinion. But so the game continues. Queen g6. Again, you want to pick up f6 with check if you can. So you slide in queen g6 first. Queen f7. Queen takes d6. So white has 6 pawns to 3. So he's got the full 3 pawns for the piece. It's just a question of whether or not it's a good 3 pawns or not now. Queen e7. And then this slow move, rook a to d1. Which in a way is kind of surprising. Like... you know, the attack is maybe fizzled out, but white still has 3 sort of connected pass pawns on the king side and a majority on the queen side too. So this is one of those positions like after queen d6, rook d6, where like white still has like a lot of pressure in my opinion, at least on a practical level, because black still has to find a way to get developed, like can't develop the knight yet. And again, this rook is trapped, and you could very easily see like white going rook e6, picking up this pawn, and then this pawn is weak, and then before you know it, you're facing down like 6 pawns for a piece or something. So Erdos finds the best move in my opinion, rook a7. There's like this annoying threat of rook f7, and after like f6, then knight d7 would pick that pawn up. But also just knight d7, getting ready to develop his last piece. Shirov like correctly goes g4, not only to get these things rolling, but because like if fg, now rook f7, g4 again, and you're back in business. And incidentally, I think like Erdos, this is like the final mistake of the game. Probably he goes rook h7. It was probably better to go fg3 and lop off a set of pawns. Because I think it's likely that if the game went the same way as it did, black would be happy to not have the f4 pawn because it can be a weakness later. So like for instance, the game continues rook h7, king g2, knight d7. If e4 instead, then rook f6, king g7, rook e6, takes, and black can't hold it together. So like this is an example where black would be much happier if he took these pawns off the board, for instance, because after rook e4, there's no real way you're holding on to the pawn, and so you're dealing with 5 passed pawns for the knight. Whereas like after g4, f takes g3, similar variation here, e4, rook f6, then rook e6. It might not look like it, but this position is less easy to win. Again, like with the f pawn not here, white's pawns, there's only 3 passed pawns on the king side, they're fractured. This would be an easier defensive task. And in fact, like white's not going to be able to hold on to this e pawn, for instance. Like knight e5 and king e6 is a threat. Yeah. So that's kind of a significant difference. So after g4, I think Erdos misses a pretty key defensive opportunity. It's also a very teachable moment, I think, to go fg. But yeah, so he goes rook h7, king g2, knight d7, just finally getting, literally on move 34, his knight b8 finally gets off the back rank, which is pretty amazing. I mean, like, just a really beautiful game. And then Shirov finds this ultra-precise move b4. stopping knight c5. So like, for instance, if rook a6 instead, whoop, if rook a6 instead, knight c5 is kind of annoying, and there's all like these little variations where knight d3 or knight e4 shows up. Like, let's see, like rook c6, knight d3, rook e4, for instance, rook takes h3, with the idea of king takes h3, knight takes f2 check, rude. Or, you know, rook a6, knight c5, rook f6 check, king g7, rook d6, rook e to h8. These are just sample lines. Rook h1, protecting h3, then f3 check. When you don't really want to take here because rook h3 check, but also you can't go king g3 because of knight e4 check and knight d6. So, so knight d7, b4, again, like just really brilliant calculation and like precise technique by Shirov. And yeah, I mean, the rest of the game you can almost give without comment because like the plan is so simple, you know, but the positions are so, the resulting positions in my opinion are like so like immortal game-esque and so beautiful. I'll just show it like mostly without comment. Shirov coordinates his rooks on the d file really nicely and then just starts pushing the pawns. And I wish in a way he would have just played f6 here so we could get this beautiful like pawn trio on the 6th rank, but he goes h7, which is probably the most natural move, honestly, because king g7, f6 comes for free. Obviously, king f6 or king g6 allows white to make a queen. King h8, pretty much forced. Actually, not pretty much forced, definitely forced. Rook h1, protecting the h-pawn, so g7 is coming, and Erdos throws an f3 check, the last spite check, hoping for king h3, knight f2 check, which would be winning for black, actually, and after king g3, he resigned. Yeah, the kid still got it, man. I mean, geez, what a beautiful game. I mean, there's very few things that are aesthetically pleasing to me in chess anyway than like the super advanced pawn mass like versus a piece or whatever. And like, what kind of a planet do you have to be on to like first like the spidey sense, you know, like queen c7, knight h4, like just like he gets the tingle and he's like it's go time. And then like I wonder when he saw knight d5, if he played like if he played knight h4 on just general principles, like I want to put my knight on f5, because like even positionally, like it's possible he was just thinking like at this point, like, you know, it's just a good move, right? Um, I'm curious to know when, like, if he saw knight d5, like if he saw knight h4, bishop d7, knight d5, and like how far he saw. But like, yeah, again, like what planet do you have to be on to find like knight d5? I mean, maybe I'm making too big a deal out of this, but man, what a beautiful game. I mean, just a genius attacking game, just like in a tremendous feel for the initiative. Uh, yeah, I mean that's really all I got. I'm left dumbfounded. I hope you guys like the video. I'm trying to be consistent with the videos. Like and you know subscribe if you're seeing this video from like the YouTube suggestions. What up? Like and subscribe. You know, hit the bell. All that cheesy crap that YouTubers say. I'm saying it. And thanks for watching, guys. Tony Rowe out.